About a month ago now, I shared with you 3 game-changing mods for Fallout 4, kicking off a series of videos where I want to basically show you how to totally transform this game, each iteration looking at one aspect or another. In the past, I showed you some stuff around the Minutemen and settlement-focused mods that synergize really well together, while this time around, I actually want to focus more on combat and combat with enemy NPCs in Fallout 4. Share with you some of the various mods to come out over the past few years that really overhaul this part of the game, that'll make it more interesting, more fun, and perhaps even incite you to start a new playthrough. And specifically with this video, I tried to pick some mods that will synergize quite well together to make things pretty interesting. Although before that, I do want to share a message from today's video sponsor, introducing Raid Shadow Legends. If you've never heard of Raid, it's really a role-playing game done right. It has very quickly become a sensation in the mobile gaming world, achieving over 15 million downloads in just the past 6 months. So if you're not familiar, what exactly is Raid? It's an epic dark fantasy game at its best. A hero collection turn-based experience with over 400 champions for you to collect and personally customize. And with those champions, you could explore the fully voiced and really well done story campaign, or just head over to the PvP arena. The best part of all this being the game is free to play, but there's also been some cool new features, the multi-battle auto mode, so you could allow battles to run in the background and not spend too much time on the grind, but also things like weekly tournaments and events, so there's constantly something to win, and the game continues to grow super fast with new updates, such as a recent Halloween event where you can unlock the special Harvest Jack champion, or even several of the other unique ones added with this. But with that said, what are you waiting for? You can go to the video description right now and find links to download the game, and if you're a new player, thanks to the dev team, you're able to get 100,000 free silver, as well as 1 free epic champion that has been getting overwhelmingly positive reviews by the players. In game, you can see some of the rewards here, but this offer is only available for the next 30 days, so if you're interested, you should sign up now. But looking back at Fallout 4 and some of the cool mods I do want to share with you, the first one I do want to talk about is Immersive Fallout. As you can probably tell by reading this, what it's going to do is make Fallout 4 a bit more immersive in a variety of different ways. And this, I think, has the effect of actually making combat and enemy encounters quite a bit more dynamic and interesting. And also, this isn't to be confused with immersive gameplay, which is a separate mod that overhauls other aspects of the game, but kind of similar titles. So one of the first changes you'll notice almost immediately after installing this mod is the variation and change it brings to movement in this game. In Fallout 4 by default, you could move pretty quickly, but with Immersive Fallout, it's going to make it feel like your character has some weight behind them. You will move slower, not super slow, not to the point of it being obnoxious, but slower so it feels more considerable. This will affect typical walking, but also sprinting. It'll carry over to power armor. Also, power armor being a massive suit of metal, so it doesn't make sense to just be able to flip, flop, and move around so quickly. But one of the reasons I really like these changes is they will also affect other NPCs. Now, as somebody with a bat is running towards you, they're going to run not quite as quick as they did previously, and you won't be able to just easily run away. This is most noticeable when dealing with enemy creatures in Fallout 4, as several creatures will actually get the reverse effect. Things like super mutants, wolves, deathclaws, and even some of the bears will actually move quite a bit faster. They're giant creatures made up of a ton of muscle, and it makes sense that they could really dart around. So as such, a lot of these encounters become a lot more stressful, but a lot more interesting also. Although fortunately, this is only one half of this mod. And on the other side of things, we also see some changes to the weapons of Fallout 4. By default in Fallout 4, when you fire a weapon, it actually will have a recoil recovery system, so it'll kind of return to wherever you were aiming previously. Right off the bat, this mod is going to remove that and tweak the recoil for all of the weapons in this game. So now after firing, there's going to be real recoil that you'll have to recover from. This, of course, having the largest effect while using automatics in Fallout 4. It's also going to remove that kind of bizarre zoom-in effect that you got while aiming down sights in this game. So now when you're looking down sights, although you will have a reticle, your camera won't zoom in any unless you are using a zoomed-in scope. But overall, I think these changes just make the combat and interactions with other NPCs a lot more interesting, and oftentimes a lot more difficult. But it does so in a pretty natural way, without having artificial handicaps here or there. Everyone's kind of on an even playing field with this. But to go along with this, another very immersive mod to make things quite a bit more interesting is Weapons of Fate. Many of you guys have probably heard of this one. It was super popular upon release back in 2016, but since then it's actually received several updates, adding additional features and just making the mod all around a bit more interesting. So at its core, what Weapons of Fate is going to do is overhaul the ballistics of the weapons in Fallout 4. So after downloading this, every bullet type in Fallout Fallout 4 is going to have a velocity associated with it, this meaning two major things. First and foremost, how quickly it'll get to its target, but also how soon you'll see some of the drop-off effects for said bullet. And this could have a pretty big effect. If you actually compare some of the lower velocity ammo to some of the higher velocity ammo, there is a pretty clear difference there. To go along with this, there's tracers added in, making it so it's actually a lot easier to see these bullets in action, and this will affect all of the various weapons in Fallout 4, not just your own, but also those of enemies. And maybe the video doesn't really convey this super clearly, but this actually has quite a large impact in game. By default in Fallout 4, bullets will just arrive at their target immediately and have no drop-off effect. That's no longer the case, so if you're a sniper character, things are going to be pretty different, but even just for regular characters. A lot of other games have features like this, but when you combine Weapons of Fate with Immersive Fallout, it really does make things feel a lot more realistic around the gunplay, but also just a lot more fun to use, or at least that was my own personal take on it. Sometimes it was more difficult, you had to think about it a little bit more, but at the same time, it oftentimes felt much more rewarding, and there were tangible pros and cons to using different types of calibers, outside of just the flat damage changes. Some of the more recent updates have actually added additional effects for incendiary or explosive bullets. These will also be affected by gravity and actually have larger impacts, but then one final one to really make things feel quite a bit more realistic and the gameplay a lot more interesting is better locational damage. This is an iconic mod. It's one that many of us know about, many of us have used for a long while. It was actually released the same month of Fallout 4, although it's been receiving updates with the latest one coming just last month. It's a huge mod, and if you really want to get into it, I recommend heading to the mod page, and this will give a kind of brief overview. So just in general, this mod's actually going to come with a flat-out overhaul of all of the weapons in Fallout 4. Ranged and melee weapons will receive balance changes, making some more powerful, but just in general, actually making it so most weapons are viable throughout most of the game. With this mod, you'll pretty quickly find that you do more damage than you did previously, but also conversely, enemies will deal more damage to you also. It definitely ups the stake of combat, but also planning things out, which I think actually meshes really well with the first two immersion mods in this video. But I think what makes better locational damage really stand out is this is done in an intelligent way. A lot of mods out there will do flat increases or decreases to stats, while this one's more focusing around modification, armor, what kind of equipment you're using. A high tier enemy will have better armor. They're not just going to have more health for no reason at all. But conversely, humans are still humans, so landing a headshot will pretty much finish somebody off all of the time unless they're wearing a helmet. Although, as you get tougher and tougher enemies or some of the creatures in the game, this will become increasingly difficult and will require a higher caliber round. There's also new features, things like bleeding. This could happen to you, but you'll also inflict it on enemies. After taking damage or getting shot, you will have a bleed out effect that you'll have to address. The better armor you are wearing, the less likely for this to happen, but it always is possible. This will also add in staggers and shotgun knockbacks, but if you don't just want to be guns blazing, there's also stealth takedowns and finishing moves that you can use. And really what I would argue this mod has the effect of doing is actually just making combat in Fallout 4 far more interesting. Combat is going to be a lot faster paced, and having the right tools, preparing with the right equipment will be essential to success. Although you'll have a lot more tools at your disposal. Almost every weapon will be viable to some degree, and you can take advantage of things like those staggers or stealth takedowns. I personally really like this playstyle. I think it makes combat a lot more fun, and it just totally removes bullet sponges from this game, which is one of my most disliked features overall. But as I mentioned before, this mod is still getting pretty regular updates. One of the more recent updates made it so enemies now don't just have energy resistance, but rather their resistances will be broken up into frost, fire, and electrical. And this just adds a little bit of added depth to that category. And although that is all fun and interesting, you also do need something to actually use all of this content on. Those three mods I think synergize pretty well to make combat and weapons in this game a lot more interesting and a lot more fun to use, but the Deadly Commonwealth expansion is going to overhaul the enemies you are facing. This does a wide variety of things. The first thing you'll notice is enemy AI is pretty different. Just in general, they're going to be quite a bit more aggressive, so they will run after after you or attack you in groups more often. Grenades will be flying at you if you don't position yourself accordingly. It also will overhaul some of the equipment they are using, so you'll find some of the enemies in Fallout 4 using things you've never seen them use before, or even some new and custom content added in, but all of this does fit in very well with that existing faction. But one of my favorite features of this is it actually adds in a couple of new NPCs and a variety of new NPC bosses. So you have things like the Raider Boomer, which is a new type of raider that actually explodes on death and will run at you, or a Gunner Medic that will actually heal all of the gunners around him. And outside of just new NPCs, there'll also be more NPCs spawning in at some of those known encampments around Fallout 4's Commonwealth. You'll find more gunners at Quincy, but also a couple of unique kinds of gunners. There's going to be several named bosses that do have unique rewards all throughout some of these major locations, and you'll find changes like this throughout all of the major factions in this game, with nearly all of them having at least one kind of new NPC type. But also something pretty cool, outside of just the Overhauls to faction strongholds, giving them new NPCs, better equipment, and just more NPCs, sometimes you'll also find one faction attacking another. So you might just stumble upon a bunch of raiders going head to head with a bunch of the children of Adam. This is pretty cool, and it makes the world feel a little bit more lived in. It makes some of those encounters a bit more unique and memorable. And I particularly like this one because it's not some drastic, totally game-changing overhaul. It's just adding in a few things here or there, making some of these factions a little bit more interesting, having a little bit more depth to them, and it is particularly refreshing on a new playthrough. But speaking of things that are refreshing in Fallout 4, one that I think a lot of people have been sleeping on is modern weapon replacers. I've talked about these mods a couple of times on this channel, but at their core, what it is a series of mods that allows you to take one of the base weapons in Fallout 4 and replace it with a new weapon mod. So let's say you're tired of seeing assault rifles or laser rifles, you can make all of the assault rifles or laser rifles spawn as the RU556 mod. Individually, this could be pretty cool, but it is especially useful and makes the game really interesting when you use the all-in-one pack. Basically with this, you could change out literally every weapon in Fallout 4. You could totally replace all of the vanilla options with custom mod options that fit in pretty well. So me, for example, I dislike pipe weapons. I never want to see a pipe weapon again, so I took out every pipe weapon, and now instead we're getting MP7s or other revolvers. There's a ton of different options here. It supports many of the popular weapon mods out already, and it has been constantly getting updates. We just saw a new release for the MP5 affecting the SMGs, and I find this one particularly cool because when you set it up appropriately, it can give you a totally different look in Fallout 4. It takes away all of those old vanilla weapons that you're used to seeing and replaces them with things that are interesting. Weapon mods that you maybe downloaded a while ago but then didn't really use too much will start popping up more and more often. But either way, yeah, those are 5 game-changing mods that I think will drastically improve the combat side of Fallout 4, making things more immersive, making some of your encounters more interesting, and hopefully just making the game a little bit more fun for you. Again, this is only the second iteration in this series, so there definitely will be more in the future. But with all that being said, I thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.